Prop 33, good, bad, or really ugly? That's what we're going to talk about today.
You're listening to Home Sellers Advantage. I'm your host, Aaron Zapata.
And I'm your other host, Todd Anderson. We are the Bald Brothers team at Impact Realty Group with Real Broker, and we are here to give you the Home Sellers Advantage.
You can find us online at www.baldbrothers.tv. Again, that's baldbrothers.tv.
Or you can call us at 833-305-BALD. That's 833-305-2253.
Hey, welcome back to our show. I am Aaron.
And I am Todd.
And we've got a special guest with us today, and we're excited because we're going to dig into the nitty-gritty about Prop 33, as well as some other items that are on this year's election. And before I introduce Tim, I just want to say, this is not about politics. This is about homeowners. This is about property rights. This is about the cost of owning homes here in California. And as you guys know, if you listen to us regularly, this is the Home Sellers Advantage show. And we want to provide you information so that you can make informed decisions about your home, about your right to own a home, about taxes, about things that are going to, either harm or hurt or benefit you as a homeowner. And so we have asked Tim Shaw to join us today to talk about this upcoming proposal, Prop 33, and whether or not it's good or bad for you. So Tim is here with us today. Tim, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
It's good to have you. So a little bit of background about Tim, and then we're going to let you give a little more information about himself. But Tim is the Government Affairs Director. And I had the privilege of meeting with him in person with my son, Malachi, as we interviewed him about kind of where does the money go for the political action committee that, realtors have, and how does that work, and what does a lobbyist do, and all that kind of stuff. And so I got an in-depth kind of background with Tim and my son as he graciously answered those questions for us. And so when I thought about this topic, I got to call Tim. And Tim's going to know what to do. But Tim is the Government Affairs Director for Pacific Association of Realtors here in North Orange County, as well as the TriCounty Association of Realtors, which is like in the southeast corner of Los Angeles County. And so he is the guy that we go to when we say, what does this stuff mean for homeowners? And so, Tim, welcome to the show. Why don't you give us a little bit more background about you?
Thank you. Sure. So, been here with the Realtor Association just over 9 years. I really enjoyed working here. I worked for a member of the state Senate previously. A member, he'd been in the state assembly and state Senate, Bob Huff, who was a real mentor to me.
Great guy.
Once upon a time, I was on the city council and mayor of La Habra. I now hold elected office. They let me goof around on my own in politics here. I'm elected to the Orange County Board of Education, and I've been doing that for a few years. Really enjoy that. And I also teach American government part-time over at Rio Hondo College in Whittier. So my wife and I have 6 sons, all boys. So that's the unique thing about the Shaws, I guess. That's statistically very improbable.
You are one in a million.
So, yeah. Anyway, but happy to talk about Prop 33.
Great. Last night I was watching the news, and there was a commercial break, and there were, I think, 5 or 6 commercials in this commercial break. And it started out with a yes on Prop 33. And then it went into a pro-candidate commercial. Then it went into a commercial slamming that candidate from the opposing party. Then it went to a no on Prop 33 commercial, and then it had 2 more political commercials, and I literally tuned out because I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, the whole media industry right now is just being supported by political campaigns, and I'm sure they love that. But if you are just looking through the pamphlets you get in the mail, the things you hear on the news, it's very confusing because they make arguments audibly on these commercials and in the postcards that sound convincing. And so that's why I wanted to bring you on here so you can help us get through the nitty-gritty of Prop 33. What is Prop 33 and how does it affect homeowners?
You make a great point. Try not to. People should never base their vote on the latest TV commercial. You're probably only getting a sliver of the truth there.
Yeah. Or on the name of any sort of bill or ballot measure. Just the name alone can be misleading.
Yes, they're only giving you a few seconds on that TV, and so they spin it very wildly. So,
Yeah.
but Prop 33, to understand Prop 33, you really need to understand a state law that got put in place back in the 90s called the Costa-Hawkins Act. So, Mr. Costa and Mr. Hawkins co-authored this bill. It was bipartisan. Costa was a Democrat, Hawkins a Republican, and they came together to work on this bill that became a law. It was signed into law by Governor Pete Wilson in 1995, and it basically put guardrails in place in the state of California as far as what you can and can't do with rent control. Any local jurisdiction within the state has these kind of guardrails up, if you will, because of the Costa-Hawkins Act. So what the Costa-Hawkins Act did, first off, it said any property, any residential property built after 1995, you can't have rent control on it. So the economic idea here is if you could, if you're building an apartment building and the government's going to come around and put a rent control policy on place, it obviously kills the economic incentive for that. So to make sure that we never had policies in the state of California that discouraged the production of housing, Costa-Hawkins said anything built after 1995 can't have rent control. So there are rent control policies or cities with rent control, but they can only apply on the older housing stock, older than 1995. Another thing is you can't apply your rent control at all on single family homes. It's only going to be apartments, single family homes or condos. So it can't touch single family homes. And another third principle in Costa-Hawkins is the idea of vacancy decontrol. So let's say you do have rent control and you've got a tenant in an apartment. When that tenant moves out, the property owner, when the new tenant moves in, the property owner can charge the rent at market. It can kind of readjust up to market. In other places, maybe New York City or some of these, the new tenants, price is what the last tenant was paying. It kind of, whether they're moving in or out. But with Costa-Hawkins here in California, if a tenant moves out, it resets itself to the market. So again, a big boon to the property owner to make sure that they, every once in a while, when their tenants leave, they can catch back up. Mm-hmm. So what Prop 33 simply does is eliminates the Costa-Hawkins Act.
It just takes it away.
Straight goes away. So if you read the language of it, it's very short. It just basically says the state of California will not have any policy basically around rent control or limiting rent control. It's something very short like that. So,
and just to clarify, so that means if that eliminates that, so that means that any properties built after 1995 and single family residences, condos are now eliminated for that protection entirely.
Correct. Now, to be clear, I'm sorry, just to be clear, just because if Prop 33 were to pass, it doesn't mean the next day your city is going to necessarily adopt rent control, but your city council would be fully empowered to pass rent control, that very onerous kind of rent control like that.
And is this a complete elimination of, and so like they can go now back and go all the way back to 1995 and say, well, I know these were protected for a time, but now that building, we're going to enact rent control? Or is it just moving forward on new builds?
A city could do whatever they wanted. There won't be the state guardrails in place, if you will. So ironically, so the politics of California, of course, have evolved over the years. So back in the mid-90s, we were a more conservative state. We got our legislature and our governor to pass the Costa-Hawkins Act. Just a few years ago, our state actually did pass statewide rent control of AB 1482. It is within the confines of the Costa-Hawkins Act. The existing statewide rent control says that you can only raise your rent up to 5% a year plus inflation, plus CPI, not to exceed 10%. But it doesn't apply to single family homes and all those other things that Costa-Hawkins said. So there is already rent control across the state of California now with AB 1482, but if this 33 passes, you kind of knock away the guardrails of Costa-Hawkins. So,
And do you think that, as you mentioned, that this would basically remove the guardrails, so municipalities, cities would be able to enact their own regulations regarding that? Do you imagine that this would disproportionately affect larger cities, more urban areas as opposed to suburban types of areas?
Well, there's a political philosophy here at play. So places like Berkeley or
Hmm.
Hollywood or San Francisco or Los Angeles, maybe they're probably more philosophically inclined to
Yeah.
have government imposed price controls in the market, and you probably would see, because even before Costa-Hawkins, there were cities like I think Santa Monica, Berkeley. There was a few cities that did have rent control already,
Mhm.
so in place. So, but yeah, it'll kind of depend on the politics of your hometown and what kind of city council you have
Hmm.
there, but it'll just become a fight. This is a part of what we're very concerned with is this city has one, rent control policy right next door. They have rent control, but it's a little bit different, and it's going to be very confusing to people
Hmm.
what's going on out there. So at least with Costa-Hawkins, we have that across the state, and everyone at least knows what that is. So
Wow. Tim, I'm in real estate, and of course Todd and I both are.
We kind of both
We
are.
kind of are. We're the Ball brothers. So, uh, but I didn't know it was just a complete repeal, right? And from a homeowners and a landlord or apartment owners standpoint, this really could harm the overall economy in California when you start enacting rent control that basically restrict free use of property and basically strips you of rights as a homeowner. If I want to rent my house out because I'm going to move, it's a rental. I bought another house. The city could say, "Hey, well, you can't rent that for more than X amount." I mean, do you think they can go so far as setting the rent to start based on the 3 bedroom, 2 bath square footage? Do you think it'll go that far, or is it just, "Hey, we now have the rights to, and we're going to hold it in the back of our pocket, and we might not do anything right now, but what does this look like?" I mean,
normally when they go about doing rent control, they'll let you start off at market, but then they cap how much you can increase. So, maybe it starts off, oh, it doesn't seem so bad. I'll give an example. Santa Ana recently did a rent control. The way their policy works is you can only go 80% of CPI or 3%, whichever is less. So
mm,
if you can only raise your rent once a year, and at most it's 3% or 80% of CPI, whatever is less. So in periods of time when we have high inflation running, like we've had for a few years, I mean, you're not even going to keep up with inflation. So
Hmm.
what's going to tend to happen? I mean, so every year you just kind of fall further and further behind the market. Now, ironically, what we see often happens, if you're the property owner and you've got a property in a place that's got rent control, and they only let you raise your rent once a year, you're you're crazy if you don't raise your rent to the cap every single year, right? Because once you fall behind, you can't catch up. So I think in reality, a lot of property owners might even go a few years without raising the rent on their tenants. They got a good tenant, they're not trashing the place, they're paying their rent on time. Okay, okay, we're just going to leave the rent steady for a few years as kind of a thank you back to them. But if they come in with rent control, no one's going to let their property go a few years without raising the rent. They're going to raise it every single year. So we've seen actually places, well-intentioned rent control, it drives up rents.
Hmm. Well, so
yeah, for sure.
I interesting. I was having a conversation with. I have 3 daughters, by the way. So you have 6 sons. I'm halfway there.
We'll
Uh,
probably end
if
up getting
I,
related here.
yeah, if I kept on going, I'd probably end up with 6 daughters. Uh, no, but one of my daughters, I have having a conversation with her because she, like many, saw one of the many commercials and Prop 33. You talk about it being the rent control. Um, and it sounds on the outside like a good thing. I mean, and that's what's so confusing is because when you hear these things with just looking at the title, or it seems like a good thing, why wouldn't it be a good idea for renters to have some sort of control so that they're not paying more? But you just explained very cohesively that this could end up actually raising rents higher. But then there's also another aspect of it, which is it disincentivizes builders and people from. We already have a housing shortage in the state of California, and this seems like this will add to the problem, and then make the cost of housing more expensive. Wouldn't you agree? And then of course, supply demand greater demand and less supply. I mean, it seems like on both the renter side and on the purchase side, it creates a problem.
You took the words right out of my mouth. The next point I was going to make was, we in the Realtor Association, I think everybody agrees, you know, housing has become very unaffordable and we don't have enough of it to meet the demand. So demand has outpaced supply for a long time in the housing market, which is why, in the economic terms, why the price has gone up. It's like having an auction with, you have a ton of people in a room with a ton of cash in their pocket and there's only one item for sale and people start bidding it up. And of course, that's what happens with the prices goes up and up. So the true, with rent control, you're kind of treating the symptom, but not the disease.
Mm-hmm.
The disease is we don't have enough housing. And so the rents and price, points have gotten up so high. The real solution is to have more supply of housing.
Mm-hmm.
That would on its own make, the price become more affordable for folks. So, but the problem with rent control is it directly disincentivizes the supply of housing, just like you're mentioning. So,
Yeah.
and really even the threat of rent control, every
Mm-hmm.
time, we this is now the third time in just the last couple of elections. I think out of the last 4 elections, we've had 3 statewide votes on rent control. And if you're a builder, it's just like California is scaring you to death right now. So
Yeah.
this is the problem. You don't want, we gotta nip this in the bud because we're never gonna solve the real disease of getting more supply out there if we keep doing this stuff.
Well, and let's walk through a scenario. So every renter who is considering a vote of yes on this because it's supposedly going to benefit them. If this passes, I can foresee a future where every landlord says, well, before that law comes into play, I'm going to max out my rents right now because I'm going to be stifled for future growth if I don't. And so I would expect that every renter in California would get a rent increase notice to the maximum, according to that other AB law that passed, that they can get right now. Because
Absolutely.
every landlord would be foolish not to. Because if it goes in place and they're $500 or $600 under market, they're going to get stuck at a percentage of that forever until that tenant vacates.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah. And so, and we've seen this before. Wait a minute, I voted yes for that, thinking it was going to be good for me. And why is my rent going up?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
People might get the wrong impression that if this passes, suddenly their rent's going to come.
The rent's going to go down. It's going to be opposite. Well, I think there's another factor is Aaron mentioned, just the threat of it will probably incentivize some homeowners to have investment properties to say, forget this, I'm just going to sell. And so now you have a shortage of homes that are available for rent, which creates a further shortage in the rental market.
Oh, absolutely. Withdrawing, properties from the rental market altogether is going to be very much an expected outcome here.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I might mention here, you might say, well, how come we keep having these statewide votes? Twice recently, our voters have rejected similar propositions. We have a nonprofit called the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, and they, ostensibly are helping people with HIV/AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
The head of that is working on rent control all the time. It seems to be his passion. So his name's Michael Weinstein, and they're the funders of the yes side on all these rent control stuff. So the apartment association that's gotten very tired of dealing with these statewide votes all the time, they got together a proposition that's going to be on our ballot here, Prop 34, that says if you're a nonprofit, like with healthcare, you've got to stick with the state admission of your nonprofit healthcare. So if in this case, AIDS Healthcare they wouldn't be able to go off doing rent control
Got it.
measures. They'd have to stick with their thing. So there is sort of a twin proposition here, Prop 34. If that were to pass, then the AIDS Healthcare Foundation can't come back in the future and do more rent control measures.
So Prop 33 and Prop 34, which we weren't even intending to talk about, 34 are tied together in
Yeah.
opposing parties. Really, I mean, in different sides of the coin.
Yeah.
Primarily because, and I'm sure this foundation is not the only foundation, but there are lots of nonprofits that use their donated funds to support causes that are outside of the mission of the cause of the nonprofit. And basically, Prop 34 is saying, hey, let's just put a stop to that.
It is written in such a way, if you were to read the language of Prop 34, you have to meet 4 different criteria to have this apply. And if the truth be told, those 4 criteria basically only will make it apply to AIDS Healthcare Foundation.
Okay. All right.
So the apartment guys were sick of playing defense all the time, so they played some offense, and they're kind of punching back a little bit here.
Yeah. Yeah. Now it's interesting, Tim, because it seems like the state of California believes that landowners, homeowners, apartment owners are the bad guys. You know, that we're the greedy people that own property and we're trying to control everybody. Yet in this case, I see how this passing does direct harm to the very people that it's trying to protect. Only because in the short run, right now, like everybody will get those rent increases, and then it stifles building. So we don't have any more housing units. So we don't really solve the problem. Builders leave California. They're going to go build somewhere else where they can make more profit. And when it says profit, it's not just profit. They provide jobs, they provide opportunities, you know, from contractors to electricians to, you know, all the trades. And as soon as that building slows down, then we go into an economic situation where we're hurting
Yeah.
because jobs go away.
Yeah. So many things are connected to the housing market that are beyond what people realize. So
Absolutely. And the places, you know, across our country that have the strictest rent control, of course, are the places with the most expensive rent. It just
Isn't
kind of
that
shows.
interesting,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because when you're told you can't, you know, I mean, you take the good-hearted natured landlord and you put him at odds with the state, and he's going to raise the rent because you've just told him that he's going to be suffering in the future if he doesn't now,
Mhm.
right? You've taken that good-hearted natured person and basically said, look, you can't offer a discount to anybody anymore. You have to raise the rent.
There's probably a lot of misunderstanding from some tenants that, you know, if you pay $2,000 a month for your apartment and rent, that's $2,000 profit to somebody. I
Yeah.
don't know that they all understand that on the other side, there very well is a mortgage. You know, there's a loan they're servicing over here, not to mention very expensive upkeep. You know, you gotta
Yeah.
budget to replace the roof every so often, and you know, the plumbing broke, or the we gotta
Yeah.
maintain the property. So another thing that happens in rent control, you know, they if you just really wiped out the profit margin, property owners stop maintaining their properties very well. And so over time, you also have a deterioration of the quality of housing because the government's not letting you make any profit. So it to us, it's a symptom that's worse, or it's a cure that's worse than the disease, because you end up with crummy housing. You know, you're getting for sure your annual rent increase, and it's just a mess for people to understand and comply with city to city. So
You know, that actually, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a very important point. And it also seems like on top of that, your mom and pop investors, you know, your smaller, you're just your average homeowner who has an investment property that they're renting out. They have less ability to maintain the property. It seems like also those types of homeowners will start to die out, and those rental properties will be going to larger corporations like the BlackRocks and the larger corporations that can manage to be able to afford some of those repairs and the cost of owning such an investment property.
oh, absolutely. If you're just a retired couple, you know, and you're thinking you're going to have as part of your retirement and your nest egg for retirement, that, oh, maybe I'll have a property or two I can rent out. I mean, you'd be crazy to do it in a state that's got rent control. So
Yeah.
they might go buy that rental property that they're going to rent out in another state, but they're probably you're exactly right, going to go away in California.
Yeah. Tim, are there any states that have statewide rent control?
I know of cities, statewide. I don't know that we have any statewide. I don't
Okay. Because this isn't saying California is going to become the rent control body, but it will allow all cities to enact local rent control.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So it keeps coming back to us year after year.
Yeah.
Who stands to gain?
I try to be somebody who is, I try to avoid attacking other people's motives.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume the yes side is well intentioned and not, and putting a cap on rent increases. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. What it does tend to do, though, is for all the things we've talked about, I think it's they're just misguided in my view. So
well, and there's all the unintended consequences, right? You make a decision now based on what you think is best now, but you didn't realize that was going to create a problem, down the road, because it just wasn't in your peripheral vision as to that would become an issue, right? And so I think that you're right. We have to give them the benefit of the doubt. And also too, for those that have hung in here this long, Tim's not coming in at this, and neither are we, as either Republican or Democratic or any other in between. Tim looks at, his role, and him and I have talked about this when I was interviewing with my son, but there's the realtor party. We are in favor of home ownership rights and what will increase the ability for people to own home and own housing and enjoy it. And I talk with a lot of renters who are saving money to buy homes, but then they never buy them. I don't know why, but other than the fact that housing has continued to go up so much in expense because we don't have enough of it, this is just going to harm that ability for a renter to jump into housing ownership. I think it will. So I don't know if that's a good logical, bridge, but I think that's going to be one of the unintended consequences.
Our economists at the Realtor Association have kind of done, trend analysis and forecasting into the future. And when I started here, I remember sitting through one of the presentations, and the projection by 2040, California is going to be a place where there's two groups of people: the super rich and their servants, the people who mow their grass or cook their food or whatever.
Serfs.
but the middle class is looking to be extinguished in the state within a few decades if we don't turn this around. And so much of it comes back to housing, getting people into housing they can afford, and with good housing policies, we can get there. I mean, California is a really big state. I mean, you fly up to Northern California or so, you're looking down, it's like, wow, there is a lot of room. So we got
a lot of vacant land.
Yeah.
It's a big state. That's right.
Yeah. So, well, anything else you want to add on here before we wrap up this special episode on Prop 33?
No, just no, that's our message right now. We're out. It's the Realtor Association. I don't know what you guys are going to say, but we we're saying no on 33 and yes on 34. And
yeah,
you're right. Realtors, we're very bipartisan. Lots of Democrats, lots of Republican realtors. We when we come together, we say there's not a red or a blue. We're a purple, purple solution. So we've always tried to maintain a bipartisan. We have bipartisan membership and bipartisan support. On candidates we support, as long as they're good on property rights and home ownership. So
I'm gonna throw this in here as a story. We sold a house to a couple, and they were in Santa Ana, and they were in a rent-controlled apartment, and they had stayed there a long time because it was an incredible price that they were getting. And here's what I find interesting is that this couple has done very well for themselves, making great money. And yet they were still choosing to stay in a rent control.
yeah.
And so rent control doesn't mean more access to lower income families. This is a highly qualified couple that can pay more they bought a house, right? They can pay more, but yet they're choosing to rent, which is
Mm.
and if it's in a rent control, you think conceptually, well, if you don't make as much money, you should kind of have first access. This isn't the first access plan. This is just, hey, we're going to create rent control. And so keep that in mind, is that, a yes on 33 doesn't make housing accessible. It just caps the incentive on homeowners and builders to create more housing, which would make more housing accessible, which would lower the rate of housing in California. So I'm going to say no on 33.
We heard an anecdote years ago. There was a law school student who went to Berkeley Law School. Now, Berkeley was one of the cities decades ago that did have rent control. And so he was a poor student, he got into a rent control department. Well, he graduates from Berkeley Law School, became a lawyer. He's now a judge making a lot of money. He still lives in the rent control department.
Oh, really? Well, there's another example.
Another example. It doesn't create housing accessibility.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I will concur with both of you. No on 33. It does the exact opposite of what the seeming intention is. And with all of these things, you have to look deeper. You have to see what the long-term consequences are. We tend to be a culture that is very much we have a knee-jerk reaction to things, and we need to, just as people and as homeowners, we have to take a step back and not go with the initial reaction and look and see what the long-term effects are. And so, Tim, thank you for sharing that. I think it really uncovers a lot of the dangers of Prop 33, and we're hoping for the outcome that we're all looking for. No on 33, and you said yes on 34.
The Realtor Association recommends yes on 34.
Yep.
All right. Hey, well, thank you so much for being here. If you are watching us, listening to us, like, subscribe, take a screenshot of however you're listening to this or watching it, tag us, let us know that you found it helpful, and comment.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that this episode might be contentious. And so if you disagree, if you have problems with what we've said, we invite you to share, make a comment on it. By all means, let us know. We'd love to know what you think and what you have to say as well.
That's right. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We hope you come back. God bless. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Home Sellers Advantage. The Bald Brothers team is a licensed DBA of Real Broker, licensed by the California Department of Real Estate, number 02022-092. Again, we do not give any real estate, legal, or financial advice. If you'd like to reach out to us, you can call us at 833-305-BALD, or you can reach us online at baldbrothers.tv. Equal housing opportunity.